Well, good morning, SilentEgo listeners and viewers. We have another soul and an entrepreneur, Oddny Edwards, who is a food entrepreneur, and she has got an amazing story. She's Icelandic, so she's from Iceland. We've never had an Icelandic lady on the podcast before, but we're going to learn an awful lot about her story, her life, her spirituality, and how she's got to where she is today, what the future looks like. But dare I say, how did we come across Oddny? Well, Ben Rayner, my business partner in Zengility.life, reached out, made a connection. Isn't it a strange world? We're all connecting. We're all interconnected. And Oddny has developed a very interesting coffee. And Ben kindly bought me some coffee for Christmas, knowing that I'm a coffee connoisseur. I'm a 4:00 in the morning guy, and I love my coffee because I treat it like a ritual. And Oddny's coffee is probably the best coffee I've ever tasted. And it has medicinal properties to it from the ash tree in Iceland. And its name is Oskuhus, but I'm proud to introduce Oddny Edwards, who's going to talk about her life story on SilentEgo, the soul of the entrepreneur, and remember, life beyond the spreadsheet. So we're in for a wonderful journey. Where did it all begin, Oddny? And welcome.
Tak, as we say in Icelandic, which is thank you. Gosh, where did it all begin? The ash tree, and by the way, thanks for having me. It's been such an incredible way it all connected. The ash tree in Icelandic is called Askur Yggdrasil. Mm-hmm. So some people will know it as Yggdrasil. And it's the tree of Viking gods. It's where Thor is at the top and Loki and all that. God. And then the humans are at the, the stem of the tree. And then you've got the witches at the bottom. Love it. And the snake that the Vikings used to have on their ships. There's always like a little snake. Yes. And that snake was believed to be the root, and he held it together. So everything we knew, in Viking era was the tree of life. And when you grow up in Iceland, it is, I don't want to say brainwashed, but I think it's a little bit. Okay. You are just taught the stories.
The cold weather.
Yeah. It's just, you sit in and they tell you, you learn it at school, you learn it at university. It's how we live a little bit. We're so connected to our past. Mm. So for me particularly, people always ask me, why the ash tree? Why do you focus so heavily on the ash tree? And my story is quite personable. I grew up in, obviously on an island where it's very sparse and not much to do back then, and that I will probably make you a bit jealous. Okay. Because one of the things we used to do as kids is you can feel when the northern lights are about to come out. The weather changes, the temperature, the pressure. Wow. So what we would do, because there was no mobile phones back then, we would sometimes meet up. I was about to say hittast, which is meet up, with a hot cocoa flask. Wow. Sit on a beach and wait for them to kind of just dance in front of you. So I say we didn't have a lot to do, but to others, that's like, whoa, that's magical.
But people pay money for that.
I know,
They travel halfway around the world to go and do that, and you've got it on your doorstep.
Yeah,
which is fantastic. So keep going. This is fascinating.
I can talk for England and Iceland.
That's good.
And then for me, I grew up in a slightly, I don't know what the English word is, a different environment. So I was in and out of care, and when you grow up like that on a small island, there's a lot of don't talk about it, because in England, when you grow up that way, it's easier to kind of be taken away from the I don't want to say the problem, the challenge. Yeah. And you're separated. Whereas earlier, before we joked, And we said there is still a bit of a Viking culture. So if, a handshake is a deal in Iceland because you know where people live, Not saying we're aggressive, but I'm saying there's that Viking, we treat things with, there's a handshake because we know where we could reach out.
A lot of integrity and sort of trust amongst the kindred spirits of Iceland. You're all connected.
Yes, and we look out for our own.
Right.
So when you grow up in a challenging environment like I did, where I couldn't always be with the family, I'd have to go to care, you don't talk.
Right.
You sort of close it off and, don't be heard, okay to be seen, but we don't talk, and we put on the hard exterior Viking shell and you crack on. Right. And then you go back. And then you're taken again, and then you go back and you're taken again. Whereas here, there's a more approach of you get taken and they try and find a solution. So what I found is I was so creative, and I had a lot of an emotional intelligence as a kid. So I knew there was things going on that I couldn't talk about, and I didn't know where to vent, as a kid. So I started making imaginary Viking friends and climbing trees.
Wow, so the connection with the trees kicked in when you were very young, and the stimulus of that was this kind of learning about your own emotions, going in and out of, pardon the language, but care as a child. Yeah?
Yeah.
I think they call it foster care in the UK, is that right? Is it similar in Iceland, is that right?
Yeah, so now the system is there, but it wasn't always like that.
Sure.
Iceland can be a bit like Ireland in terms of when it's a family thing, you kind of go to someone in the family, then to a friend of the family.
Got it. Yeah.
Then you can be sent abroad to a family friend if it needs, if it got a bit too much. So that was my journey. And I've only really just started talking about it because I've learned that by telling a story and not over dramatizing it, it can help. It can help you and it can help others.
That's good.
But for me, a lot of them were religious.
Right.
And even from a young age, I wouldn't say I was feisty, but I'd challenge if I didn't understand. And I remember once being in church, and this was with the family that had taken me in. And the priest was, on his, I think you say altar. Yeah. And I stood up and I said, "Excuse me, I don't understand. Please explain." And that was because he was talking about something that I would witness in my normal life and didn't think it was strange. So I didn't understand the judgment.
Right.
So even as a young kid, I was like, hold on. And I think that's what I found with kind of going up trees and not disappearing, but, if I needed time out,
It's an interesting story, just to interject, Oddny, but it's this learning early on in your life, these senses.
Yeah.
The kind of the culture of Iceland, going to, did you hear the beach? Is that right?
Yeah.
Or an environment where you're waiting for the Northern Lights, this sort of, this Viking heritage, but with this huge sensitivity kicking in. So, the brittle and the hard shell of the Viking culture, but equally this soft centre, if you don't mind me saying. So where you're connecting with, the reality of life, life itself, and you're getting in touch with yourself. And these breakthroughs, so the term I would use is something I've recently learnt lately with senses, because you're talking about senses here, and finding peace in the trees, for your sort of retreat, literally your retreat, is empath, where it's all about sensing and energy. I think energy's behind this somewhere, But there's a conditioning there as well, isn't there, somewhere on this journey about, where you're going now but how it all started. So the trees, so the relationship with the trees really started very early on.
Yeah, so trees and earth, because I think we are taught in Iceland there are volcanoes, there are earthquakes. So we have a lot of respect for Mother Nature, so to speak, where not necessarily, we don't talk about feelings as a culture, but we respect nature. So it's a real interesting element of dichotomy. in my personal sort of take on it now, having lived in different cultures. Because what happened is when I became a teenager and old enough to leave, really, I ended up in Hawaii. And it was a fascinating way because I was meant to go to Hawaii when I was younger, but my mum got ill. And for some reason, there was always this belonging, like, not belonging, that's the wrong word, longing to go. It was as if...
it was a draw.
The want of going was there. And I can't explain what this part of me is, but sometimes I can just see something and won't try and figure out how to get there. I just go there.
Wow.
And then I figure it out as I go. And I was adamant at the age of 15 I was going to Hawaii. And I think I was a bit difficult. It was like, I am going.
Interesting.
I will find a way. And I went at 16. And the only family that would take on... because I wasn't quite an exchange student, but I went on an exchange student program. But the family lived up a rainforest on a tiny little part of Maui called Hana. And no electricity, no running water. Bam, they took me in because their eldest wanted to try and do the same in Japan.
Right.
And then I all of a sudden learnt about Hawaiian spirit and culture and earth and their connective sort of souls in interweaving, not necessarily seeing what's going on, but feeling it.
Right.
So they talk about the wind as being, mana, and you can often feel what's happening if you just stop, breathe, and feel what the wind's doing. And very few white kids in this school, and that was a journey. And I think because I came from Iceland, where we were taught to really respect culture, status, and earth, that then connected me to so many incredible people in Hawaii, native and expats like me.
Wow.
And that's all by the age of 16.
Good grief. So that sort of Norse roots of get the ship out, the mainsail, I'm off to Hawaii because I have a calling. I've got to get there. And you did it.
Yep.
So you're taken into sort of, a very brand new culture in a different climate altogether. So the learnings there must have been amazing.
Yeah, and I think this is where, as I'm older now, I see that past experiences, as difficult as they can be or as beautiful as they can be, they weirdly are paving a way for something in the future. You don't know what it is all the time, so you have to trust Faith. That it's just going to be okay.
It's an inner guide, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's not being scared of that, because sometimes that inner guide, it conjures up a lot of shit, and you just got to deal with it. But I think because I'd been in care, and not all care was good, some was amazing and some wasn't. When I came into difficulties in Hawaii, being white, it's not so bad now. And I was lucky because the school I went to, I still have connections there now with friends.
Fantastic.
But when we would go on sporting trips, like when we had to do baseball and basketball, being white didn't often play in your favour. And I came home from a trip once, and the guy, Renee, and Eileen, the lady, real grafters, bought the piece of land, just built the house themselves, found, similar to what I'm doing, a herb that no one else is using, and have managed to get it licensed in America. So who knows? I've never actually thought about it until now. Maybe part of my journey has been subliminally from theirs, because they took something and just made it a health product. And I was crying, and Renee came in and he just went, right, okay, if that's your attitude, go back home.
Right.
And I was like, pardon? And he went, no, I'm here, talk to me, but you're not going to get far if you're just going to be in here and cry. Talk to me, find a way, go back stronger. And I was like, wow, okay. And that was a real turning point in my life because there was love, there was empathy, there was compassion. They didn't give up. And off I was sent to go and pick some pahole. That's the fern they do. Off to go to school and then help in the evening and have a good family meal. And then we got taken out fishing at the weekend and it was like, fine, we've talked about it, it's done, move on.
Fantastic. So, this is the sort of the essence of everything's signposted, isn't it? Everything's joining up. And, right now, if we start to sort of look at that heritage, the roots of Iceland, the Norse outlook, the bearings, the feeling. I was talking the other day about, just off on an angle here, about business planning in these strange times. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to plan with the circumstances we're all living in right now. So I believe we're having to draw down on our senses. We're having to navigate from a different source of intelligence. And I call it heart-centered thinking, which it's obviously something that you possibly didn't understand early on, but now, as you come in, as I said at the beginning, the trees, the ash tree, the coffee, that journey, the traveling to South America, it's just a fascinating story. And you've been in the restaurant business as well. I mean, wow, who knows where you're going to be in 20 years' time, because this is some journey that you're on, isn't it? And actually, it's not stopping. There's so much coming. And you're in a kind of I suppose in some respects, you've come to terms with the identity of you, and you're tuning into these sort of great senses that, dare I say it, a lot of people aren't operating at that level in today's society, right? So you're at a level of consciousness that is guiding you on an every other day basis. And I think that's an incredible skill. But you've, pardon the language, but you've commercialized it as well. You're making sense of it all. You're bringing it together.
Yeah, so that came from my granddad, really.
Wow.
My granddad had a knife shop in Iceland, and even though my journey with knowing family life and in and out of it, I always remember this one consistent, and that was my granddad. And one thing I used to love about him was he was, without knowing it, he was a real entrepreneur. And he, I think, instilled in me, without me knowing, to look at opportunities.
Yeah.
Because even this is my favourite story of him. But not man of many words. I must have driven him nuts because I talk so much. And he would always go, right, go to the bank. Because in Iceland, coffee is available in most places. You go to the bank, there's coffee. You go shopping, there's coffee at the end of your shopping. I love it. So he would go, right, go and tell them that, I need the flask filled with coffee. So I'd go in and, go, oh, hi, Granddad sent me. And they'd be like, okay, fine. Fill up the flask. And then we'd be in his shop and he'd have a meeting. And he'd go, right, go and pour coffee. And so I'd have to pour coffee from the flask and people would think he'd made it. Right. So he didn't pay for coffee, but he sent me and probably my other, cousins to go and get coffee. Yeah. And I really learned something there. And the only presents I ever got from him were cod liver oil, socks and knives. But I had to give him money for the knives because it's bad luck, apparently, to be given a knife and not give money. Is that true, or was that just my granddad earning a bit? I don't know.
I think there's some similar stories out there, but that's a fantastic one. I think your granddad's still around, or has he?
No, he's passed,
moved on?
Bless him,
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, he's probably in the room right now saying, "What are you saying?
Yeah.
You found me out all these years later," which is fantastic. But Oddny, as we're warming up today, I learned something that I think our listeners and viewers will really start to appreciate is women and men in Iceland. If we step back a bit to come forward about domestic duties. I mean, it fascinated me because your national sport is CrossFit, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
And tell us about that, because if you don't mind me saying this, where the men are men and the women are men in some ways as well, because you have to learn how to build and become self-sustained.
Yeah, so this is what I feel really proud of, having grown up the way I grew up. And that's because we do believe people are equal.
Right.
And this comes as far as Viking sagas. So when you really look into the Viking sagas, the men would go out and fight, but the woman would be at home taking in everything she needed, give him a strategy, and he would then go off. So it was teamwork.
Right.
So they learnt strengths, weaknesses, teamwork. And that's in our society now. Mm-hmm. So women and men are equal. We do have this rule that if either a man or a woman is paid more for having the same skill, it's an offence.
Right.
So it can be, dealt with. I don't want to say criminal offence, because here in England that's a real harsh statement, but it has consequences. But what I do like is we're not so one-sided that it's like, no, that we're all equal. We do understand that there are certain things that women will be better at and certain things that men are better at. But yes, in schools, boys are, not made to, encouraged to talk about feelings, and women are encouraged to learn carpentry and, really learning the strength of the body. And what I'm the most passionate about from that is it does desexualize the body. Wow. So I feel I have a bit of a responsibility, because bodies fluctuate in weight, they change. And because of the way I grew up, I'm now sort of learning the importance that it's okay sometimes to be a little bit slimmer, a little bit, have a bit of extra winter weight, but feel just as sexy, feel just as strong, feel just as empowered within our body. And that comes from, I think, thinking women and men are equal. There is no, I have to look a certain way or be a certain way to feel that I fit in.
That's very liberating, isn't it? There's such a sort of a status anxiety in, dare I say it, sort of the majority of Western society today about body image and how it has to be. And it's so fresh to listen to the Icelandic values. I think we've got some serious lessons here, and it's just a super story, Oddny. I mean, I really, really, really I'm right on track with this. I think it's because I'm originally from the northeast, Durham, and I know that's where the Vikings went for their holidays many years ago. And, Ben, my business partner's from Cumbria, that they didn't bother going there. There wasn't anything there. So that's but you know what I'm trying to say. But I think there's a lot of, some good essence here. Even the Icelandic football team, they're just amazing. It's such a small island, it's just power. There's a lot of power there. And, I've, candidly, with obviously lockdown and COVID and all the rest of it, we'll not go down that route. But I've been looking at lots of YouTube sort of clips and things of different cities and, holiday destinations. And I am I gravitate naturally towards Iceland. I think Iceland's a fascinating, very healthy culture. It's nice to hear those liberal values, very open-hearted, very open-minded, but there can be that macho sort of big, strong, we're the, And do you know what? And I'm not, I think the Danes and the Swedes are not far from it as well. Similar. I think it's just Norse. And, when I work obviously with my business Ego Stream, and I know when we're expanding or we're looking to hire people in the northern, the Nordics, we always call it the beer drinking countries, and the Mediterranean we call it the wine drinking countries. Yep. So we say there's beer and wine, and we separate the two, right?
Yeah, I think that's accurate.
Yeah, is that about right? But look, I mean, let's zip on to the ash tree. I'm really want to know about the ash tree. I want to know about the coffee. I want to know about you're making chocolate. You're doing some fabulous stuff. I mean, you're bringing it all together, and it's almost like there's a gravity to you. You're bringing all of these senses together, and then you're sort of expressing them, and once again in unique ways. You're staying original. And if I look at Iceland, from what I've just learned, you are original. You don't copy anything. You work with the environment you're in, even to the point of the Northern Lights. I didn't know anything about that. It's almost like there's a calling card comes and everybody goes down to because it's the feeling you get. The Northern Lights are about to arrive. I mean, how in tune can you be?
I guess I never thought about it like that. Nowadays, obviously, people just see it from their, high rises and flats. But yeah, I do think there is a sense that we are taught to just be us. And I think part of that, and that's how I'll come on to the ash tree, is in Iceland, you tend to have a full-time job and then you do something creative with your spare time. Right. So the footballers, if you think about it, they're professional footballers, but they're lawyers, they're dentists, and people find that really sort of mind-blowing over here, that you can have this, but also do something else full-time, or, So this particularly, the element of the ash tree and using it in edible form came from, I had a restaurant, cafe / bar, and then I'd take it out to London and do food stalls in South Bank and, privately, and get to cook for embassies. And I can't quite say, but, I've cooked for a few stars. And what happened is that had to close. And that gave me the foundation for this, because me and a core members of staff, we were drinking beer.
Right.
We were finishing the kegs that were left from having to close. And
it's a very Viking thing. Let's just finish the kegs. We just have a pint. You just finish the kegs.
That's why when you said that, I was like, yep, stereotypical.
Yeah, it's good.
But we didn't go out, into the village. So we got rather tipsy, a bit beyond, and it was a chap that was working for me that goes, Oddny, you're always cooking with trees. You make stuff from birch, from beech, from from old Christmas trees. I try and get people to use old Christmas trees instead of chucking them. You can make stuff with them edibly, and you can make soaps and stuff. And he goes, why have you never done the ash tree when this whole restaurant behind me is based on the ash tree? And I went, never thought of that, type thing. And one of the reasons why is because I've never seen anything written, or in all the foraging or all the courses I've done or all the education, there's never anything about the ash tree being edible, right? So we Google, thanks Google.
Uncle Google comes in again.
I know, Mr. G. Yeah. And we find an article saying that the ash tree is edible. Off I go and I start testing it on me. Can't find the article. Cannot find it today.
Wow.
Right. But it worked wonders. And I started researching thoroughly. And I found articles in Norway. I found articles, really old articles in Danish, Swedish, and in Iceland. Couldn't really find anything in English. Found a few in France about the ash tree. And I found this thing that said it was, had antioxidants and anti-inflammatories. And I've had severe leg surgeries because I broke my leg quite severely, and all of a sudden I found a difference. But I'm aware that sometimes when you discover something, there can be that placebo effect. So I started getting people to try it, and it was working on them. So that's how the journey started. And the flavour of ash is quite extinct. Do you say distinctive? Distinctive.
Yeah.
Because just like with turmeric, anything that's that rich in health, sort of anti-inflammatory, antioxidants, and it's neuroprotective, it's going to have a flavour.
Yeah.
Come on, who doesn't drink matcha tea or green tea? It's,
Yeah.
So that's where I've spent the last 2 years playing with the flavour. What goes with it, how much, what process to use. And there was a lot of people that didn't believe me. They were like, no, the ash tree's not edible. Big foragers. But there was one in particular that I cannot thank enough, and that's John Wright from River Cottage. He gave me a whole day. We spent a whole day together looking at books And he was like, "You're spot on, girl. Go off and do it." And I was scared. And I was like, "John, people are constantly telling me it's not." And I'm constantly hitting a wall because people are so reluctant to believe me because I don't have a name in this world, in the foraging and food world. And he went, "Who cares?" He goes, "Just do it." And I left his house, and we had made alcohol. We had tried it in so many ways, and it will be an experience I'll never forget because I had someone that's got so much experience of, trying things that probably people hadn't tried before, and he's made a name for himself. And every now and again, we still pick up, and he reminds me to just do it. He's like, "I haven't got time to talk, just do it."
Yeah, that is fantastic. But as this sort of comes back to the Icelandic roots, is this, the originality and the discovery. The Vikings were, prolific discoverers. The journey into the unknown, the acting on faith and fate. It was, we don't know what we're going into. So all of these, Nordic instincts are coming to life, aren't they? This is coming back to the originality of the roots and the manifestation, the bringing to life the coffee from the tree, and bringing the two together. Yeah. And for what it's worth, listeners and viewers, I've got to say, in no uncertain terms, Oskuhusús, Icelandic inspired coffee, it is absolutely amazing. Genuinely, Ben knows this better than anybody. I'm constantly researching and testing and tasting new coffees. I'm very much heavily into my Ayurvedic therapies and powders, pine pollen, you name it. I take all sorts. But this coffee has absolute magnificent qualities to it. And I think it's very original. I think it's unique. There's nothing else like it. And if it genuinely is that ash tree the spirit of the ash tree in this coffee, it does do great things. And you know what? I'm a weight trainer as well, so I'm not saying it does this, but I'm lifting heavier weights now. So there's that Icelandic thing in there, isn't there?
No disclaimer.
Yeah.
No disclaimer.
No, don't worry. Yeah, we So what am I saying here? I mean, this is great. I mean, what a story. And so you're fully operational now, you're up and running, you've got your website going. I've heard on the grapevine that you're developing some chocolate as well, and there's other things coming down the pipe. So, yeah, I mean, still acting on gut and faith and fate and all of these things. The unplanned future. I think that's what I'll call this, the unplanned future. Don't bother with a plan, guys. Just go with that instinct, Get back to roots.
Yeah, and it's definitely been that because the vision was always to launch with a range. I wanted to be known as the ash tree lady.
Right. Well, you are. This is it.
This is it. But with the climate as it is now, it was either jump or wait. And sometimes you just got to jump. You've just got to go in, see where it takes you. And I love coffee. I'm passionate about coffee. I lived in Costa Rica. I would go to the plantation and learn about it. And the flavours of coffee for me, when I had my place in Lymington, I didn't serve cappuccinos or lattes.
Right.
A lot of people didn't like it, but there's plenty of cafes that do that. So mine was you could pick up to 7 beans. So you could have Kenyan, you could have Costa Rican, you could have Brazilian, Colombian. And when you learn about coffee, each coffee has its own flavour. It is either sweet, it is nutty, it is dark. You can get an Italian, like deep,
Yeah.
And for me, I wanted a coffee that reminded me of back home. And in England, there's been a lot of talk of Nordic coffee being light. But to the proper Nordics, that's not what it is. It's an in-between a dark and a light roast, like the one this one is. And that's why I started with the coffee, because I find that the ash tree, the sort of acidic taste of the ash, it complements a dark roast. And for some reason, it makes the dark roast a little bit sweeter. It's a fascinating blend, but it took a long time to develop. And now I've decided to be brave enough to go into chocolate. So, so I work with small independent people and we make it together. Because
Fantastic. Can't wait to taste it.
Yeah.
You got any in the bag?
No, it's not ready yet. It's in production.
Because I love chocolate as well. I'm a big chocolate. I treat chocolate like a ritual.
Yeah.
I eat a piece a day.
Ooh.
I could quite easily, like we all can, is get through the whole, block bar or packet or whatever.
Yeah.
But I treat it like a ritual. So I
Okay.
enjoy my coffee and I enjoy that sliver of chocolate once a day.
I could learn some things from you.
Yeah.
Discipline.
That's really good. No, that's good. But look, I mean, coming back to the coffee, the essence of this is fantastic. But if you look at the spiritual connotation here, the soul of this coffee, it's got a unique edge to it. It's not light, it's not dark. It's a good, it's got an originality to it. It's got that, that medicinal spirit of the Nordic terrain. It's got the power of the Northern Lights. It's got something, hasn't it? It's something really special about this.
It's really special to me because the ash tree is dying out. It's got a disease called ash dieback.
Right.
And in America, there's a borer, which is a bug that will kind of go into the bark. And when you Google or Bing or, go online to look at ash dieback, it's horrific. It's about going to cost the UK economy billions to try and save it.
Right.
So they're looking at the ash tree as a lost cause.
Oh, right.
But for me, because there will be over 100 million trees, that might not sound like a lot, but if you think that the ash tree is one of the third most populated tree in all of the UK,
right,
it's the impact of wildlife, it's the impact on soil,
right,
it's the impact on, trees give us oxygen, they absorb the carbon.
Completely, yeah.
So for me, okay, let's say the ash tree, most of it goes, what are we doing to replant it? Because now that we know that it has all these medicinal benefits, it's steeped in history, it's really sturdy, it's an incredibly strong tree. What can we do? And part of a huge personal passion is, for me, is that each product, percentage of that goes towards either research of how we can rescue the ones that are showing to be resistant to sort of the medication they're getting.
Yes.
Or how can we plant new ones of non-disease trees further down the line? Because even if you think, if all the ash goes, what tree's next? The oak is under threat, the beech is under threat. Where we live by Bradbury Rings, the beech there is starting to get diseased and fall down. That's going to change the landscape. So a huge thing for me is not just trying to plug the medicinal benefits and the product, and I believe in it, I drink it all day.
Completely.
But for me, it's using something that can connect with a consumer-led society. Hey, here's a product, it tastes good, but it also does good for you and for the environment. And that's something really passionate and won't change for me. And hence I use the ash, because I want to highlight the issue.
And I think that's incredibly well meant and wholehearted. So listeners, viewers, we've got to save the ash tree. Yeah, there's no two ways about it. It's endemic in Oddny's core. She's standing for a great cause. She's developed an amazing coffee for us all to connect with. So let's connect. Let's save the ash tree. Come on, we can do something about it, and we can do it now. So let's drink lots of coffee. Let's get mega healthy, and let's put it down to the Viking qualities and the Nordic roots of the ash tree, which is fantastic. So that's good. So before we kind of conclude, I know what we're going to do. We're going to have a taste live of this coffee, and we're going to kind of have a little bit of rustle of the bag.
Oh.
Listen to that, guys. It's all in there, and it's for you to discover. And dare I say it, we have some ash tree here.
Yeah.
Right? And we're going to have a little sniff of that. Amazing. Dare I say it? Can you smoke it?
Well, I won't say I've ever tried.
Yeah. The ashtray has got,
Oh, I love it.
oh, what a beautiful smell.
Yeah.
It's so earthy, isn't it?
But it's also floral
Yes.
because it's part of the olive family.
Nice tones to it.
Yeah.
You know, I can see why the chocolate's coming in.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got it. You've got it nailed. And, but look, for our listeners and viewers today, what a fascinating story. The soul of an entrepreneur, a true soul from the Nordics, the Viking. Wow. I'm really, really inspired by this, and I hope you are today. So, Oddny Edwards, I'd like to thank you, soul of the entrepreneur, and thank you for coming on our podcast, SilentEgo. Amazing. And I believe the best is yet to come.
Fingers crossed.
But we don't know where that is yet because
No.
we work on our senses and we navigate. Very good.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.